pressure, carbon dioxide levels within the body, or water intake. All of those things would be your autonomic reflexes. Then you have a picture of the reflex arc in your textbook. It's page 302, figure 11.5. Reflex arc there shows that basically that's the functional unit of the nervous system. Very simple. You have sensory receptors that detect the stimuli. They produce the action potentials, pass it through the sensory neurons, goes to your gray, spinal cord area, where in your gray matter you have interneurons that connect sensory neurons with motor neurons, passes that action potentials to motor neurons. Motor neurons carries the action potentials from the CNS in your spinal cord to the effector organs, which in this case, in a reflex, it's usually a muscle or a gland. We will look at the effector organs being muscles for the 3 kinds of reflexes we look at in our textbook. So that's your reflex arc. Sensory receptor catching the stimuli, passing the action potentials through sensory neurons, passing it to interneurons in your CNS spinal cord, to motor neurons, action potentials coming back to effector organ. Basically, that's your reflex. The picture here in your textbook shows with all the numbers, the steps of how this is done. So take a look at that. So we look at the spinal reflexes, and we have these 3 kinds of reflexes, or 3 types we look at. We look at your stretch reflex, Golgi tendon reflex, and withdrawal reflex, all of them under your spinal reflex. So the spinal reflex has this, what we were looking at, reflex arc. That's the basic way it works. But you also see in the spinal reflex there is a site of convergence and a site of divergence. Site of divergence means that even though this action potential works from your, for example, the skin to spinal cord back to the organs, there is a site of divergence where from the spinal cord another neuron can take this action potentials to the brain where it's integrated. So that's when this reflex becomes a conscious thought. So you're thinking, will I move my finger from the fire there or let it burn? Basically you made the choice when you had time to think that way. So, but again, that takes a while. Thinking takes longer, so reflexes are faster. So in this case, from the site of divergence, this neuron takes the message to the brain, integrates it there, brings it back again, joins it in the site of convergence, where the action potential is sent in this area of the motor neuron to an effector organ, where it's going to say if your muscles will either contract, or if it's going to relax. So that, again, in your spinal reflex, I just wanted you to know that even though it's involuntary, you do have voluntary control. There is this divergence and convergence pathway that does go to the brain, even though they are simple reflexes. So reflexes can be integrated within the brain as well. Higher brain centers can suppress or exaggerate the reflexes. So the first example of the reflex we look at is what we call the stretch reflex. And this is where you have that on figure 11.7. It's a very common reflex when you go to the doctor, or they're testing to see if your coordination, if your nervous system is working well with your motor functions. They usually take a hammer, hit your patellar area there, and if you have a knee-jerk reflex, that means your system is working fine. Sometimes it can be exaggerated or less. That will give them a clue on what's going on with your nervous system there. So that's the knee-jerk reflex. We call it here the stretch reflex. The reason is whenever you take a hammer or anything and you are hitting the knee area there will be these muscles that it's actually your quadriceps femoris muscles that will be kind of stretched. That's why we call it stretch reflex. When the muscles are stretched, you have all these motor neurons and sensory neurons wrapped around your muscle fibers, which make the spindles. muscle spindles. So they detect a change there, the stretch is a change, and that causes reflex there. They send this action potential from your muscles to your spinal cord. From the spinal cord, it goes to your motor neurons and comes back in. Motor neurons will take the nerve, and in your quadriceps femoris muscle, it will tell the muscle to contract. When it does that, then you end up doing this, this knee-jerk reflex. You extend your legs forward. So that's your stretch reflex. The other one there is the Golgi tendon reflex. That's figure 11.8. You'll see that on page 305. Golgi tendon reflex, the easiest example I'm thinking of right now is when you're weightlifting, or anything, you're lifting something up. So you hold something and you're lifting it up, and you hold it up for a while like a weight. And all that weight puts this tension on your hands. All of a sudden you do this reflex, let go, like fall back, right? That happens. That's the reflex you get that we call is the Golgi tendon reflex. It was really, that reflex is meant to protect your muscles so you don't overdo it. There's a limit on how much weight you can take. So that reflex tells you to let go, move, so your muscles can relax again. So in this case, you have a sensory neuron that detects a tension applied to the muscle, and that place that it detects a tension is the tendons. Instead of being the muscles, it's the tendons. Tendons are between muscle and bone. That area there, you'll see there's a place where the sensory neurons attach. They detect a tension, take the action potential to the brain, and in the brain, take the action potentials to the spinal cord. In the spinal cord, again, that action potential is passed down to your motor neurons through an interneuron. There, the neurons there are what we call, when the synapse from sensory to motor to interneurons, actually, you have a kind of neurotransmitter that we call inhibitory neurotransmitter, or released from that area into the interneuron. So the inhibitory neurotransmitter, the motor neurons will take this message down into the muscles. In this case, it's your hamstring muscle group in your thighs. So it takes this message down to your hamstring muscle groups, and it will tell the muscle to relax. Just relax. When you relax, you're actually not moving your feet up anywhere, legs. It just relaxes. So that just, the tension, high tension, cause you to relax. In the case, if you were holding something, you would drop it, so that's really what that means. So that's the second kind of reflex. And then the other reflex is the withdrawal reflex, which is really, really common. When you're walking and there's a pin on the floor and you step on it and you go, ouch, and you lift your feet up. That's your withdrawal reflex. It's simple. You have in your skin, you have the pain receptors in the sensor. So you have the sensory neurons. They have the pain receptors there. They detect the pain from, when the pin kind of goes to the skin, detect that. So that action potential is sent through your sensory neurons all the way to your spinal cord. In there, it's excitatory neurotransmitter is sent in your interneurons to your motor neurons. Remember, previously we looked at inhibitory neurons that caused it to relax. Now we're looking at excitatory neurotransmitters that will cause your motor neurons to bring this action potential into the same hamstring muscle group, but instead of relaxing, now your muscles will contract. When it contracts, it pulls, so your legs go up, flexes back up. So that's what happens with the withdrawal reflex. You can look at that figure in your textbook 11.9. Then we go look at the structure of the nerves and a little bit of anatomy there. So figure 11.10, you'll see there's a nerve. a nerve has all these axons. Remember, there can be motor neurons, axons of that. There can be sensory, basically all this